there, Pride Toronto audience. My name is Andrew Gurza, and I'm a disability awareness consultant and content creator, and I am the host of the Disability After Dark podcast. And I'm very, very happy to be here right now to say hello to you and to talk to you today about some things you should never say to a disabled person during sex. So let's get right to that. I want to tell you all of the things you should never say to a disabled person during sex. And the reason why I want to talk about this is because this kind of stuff happens all the time with disabled people being asked really inappropriate things. But this kind of stuff happens all the time, especially in the bedroom. And I just want to give you some tips and tricks so that when you're hanging out with that sexy, seated disabled person, you know what it is not to say and not to say. Because so many people inadvertently say the wrong thing when they think they're being nice and they think they're being cool. And I just want to give you some tips and tricks. So the first thing you should never say to somebody when you're having great sex with your disabled partner, or any disabled partner for that matter, is you should never say to them, well, taking care of you isn't so bad. Don't ever say this. I've had people say this to me so many times during sex, and I never know what to say to this question. I never know if I should say thank you, if I should say, what do you mean taking care of me isn't so bad? If I should say, you don't have to take care of me? If I should say, well, what do you say to that? It's always so weird. And I always feel like when we're having sex with each other, that we're taking care of each other in some way. So the idea that when someone says to me, taking care of you isn't so bad during sex, it perpetuates the idea that because I'm disabled, I need to be taken care of, and I need someone to take care of me. And in some aspects of my life, as a person with disabilities who uses a wheelchair, that is entirely true. And in some aspects of relationships, that is entirely true, that I would need somebody to take care of me completely. But to have somebody ask this right away feels, especially in the bedroom, feels like our sexual encounter is not on equal footing, and it's a problem that I was there, and it just feels very, very strange. And it certainly isn't a thing to say after you spend time with the partner. It makes the sex feel very obligatory and not hot and fun and sexy and different like it should be. So, and instead of saying taking care of you isn't so bad, I would change that to helping you with your needs was really fun. Thank you for letting me do that. Or helping you, get undressed and redressed was super hot. Thank you for letting me do that. Say those things instead of saying taking care of you isn't so bad. Another thing you should never say during sex with a disabled person to anybody is, do your genitals work? Or in my case, as somebody with a penis, people would say to me, can you get an erection? As we're hooking up, as we're making out, all these things are happening, guys would whisper in my ear, hey, can you get it up? And I'd always be like, ugh, well, not anymore. That feels super, super awkward now, but I certainly can't anymore. And it's such a dehumanizing question to ask if your genitals work, because it reduces you to just whether or not your genitals work. And some people with disabilities, their genitals don't work in the conventional way, and they can't get an erection, or they can't get aroused, or they can't get wet or turned on. But it doesn't mean they're not enjoying themselves. And I think to ask the question, can you get it up, assumes that you already thought that as a disabled person, I was to be desexualized. And it's a really hard question to answer, because what do you say to, can you get it up? And I used to make jokes like, don't worry, my dick still works. But that's really dehumanizing to people whose genitals don't work the same way. And I think this question, it's just 100%, it's a mood killer, and it's a really not very, it's just not very kind, and it makes it really hard to engage sexually with somebody after they've asked you if you can get an erection, because if you say no, they might leave, and if you say no, they might become disinterested, and if you say no, they might think you're not interested in what's happening, and oftentimes for people with disabilities who have spinal cord injuries or things that mean they can't get an erection, it doesn't mean they're not aroused. It just means they can't have the expected physical manifestation of arousal. One of the other things that you should never say to a disabled person during sex, and I had this just recently with somebody that I was spending time with about a year and a half to 2 years ago. I was spending time with somebody in my apartment, and we were getting down to things, and the person said to me, they whispered in my ear, and I thought they were going to say something sexy like, "Oh, you're so hot, do it this way," and instead they went, "Oh, you're such a good person, you have such a nice heart." And I remember stopping them dead in their tracks and being like, "What? Excuse me? Where did you get this questioning from? Why would you say this to me right now?" And they went, "Oh, well, just because you're disabled and you're such a nice human." And I just thought, well, that's weird. You don't know anything about me, and you don't know who I am at all. And how can you assume that I have a good heart just by understanding that I was disabled? By having someone say to you things like, "You have a good heart, you're such a good person" during sex, because I'm disabled, that again shows a form of ableism, that they think that automatically, because I'm disabled, I am therefore this angelic, cherubic human. And I think that's really kind of, it's a dangerous assumption, because you don't know who I am, and you don't know if I'm a good person or a bad person. And just because I'm disabled doesn't mean that I'm either or, and you shouldn't assume things. And to say that to somebody with disabilities during sex it's just really jarring. And I remember after he said it, I was like, I don't know what to do now, and I was very confused, and I was very unaroused after that. I didn't really want to spend much time with him because I didn't know what to say. Another thing you should never say to somebody to a disabled person during sex is, "Oh, you remind me of this disabled person." I had somebody I was with once tell me that I reminded them of their friend's disabled child. And I was like, "Oh, why would you mention this to me in the bedroom?" And he was trying to explain that so-and-so and I had the same disability. But I was like, I'm not here to talk about this other person. I'm here to have great sex. And somehow you've turned it into this weird, all disabled people are the same idea. And that just made it uncomfortable and not fun for me. And I really didn't enjoy that. It didn't feel nice to have to try to be sexually aroused when somebody was saying, "You remind me of this person." And it was just like, okay. It's important to remember that all disabled people are not a monolith, and it's not really fun to bring up disability stuff necessarily like that during sex. I didn't think so anyway. And I certainly don't think you should say, "Oh, you reminded me of this person with a disability" during sex. Another thing that I've gotten during sex, I remember I was at a conference with somebody a couple years ago, and I was giving a talk, and I met this person, and we were flirting, and things were going fairly well, and we were going to hook up, and just as we were making out and getting down to stuff, and we were in the middle of things, he whispered to me, "If I were you, I'd kill myself." And I remember stopping cold again, thinking, why did he just say that? And as I stopped him and said, "Where did this come from?" And he kept trying to kiss me and keep going, And I said, where did this come from? Why would you say that? And he said, because, you're so strong, you're so powerful. If I were you, I couldn't do it. I would kill myself. And again, I just remember losing my erection, losing my arousal, and being like, I don't want to be here for this right now. This feels very uncomfortable and unpleasant, and I just didn't want to be involved with him anymore. And it just, again, it felt super dehumanizing, and it killed the mood. It made it less than sexy to want to be there with him, and it just made me feel like, oh, you think that my life's not worth living by telling me that if you were in my position, you would kill yourself. And basically what you're saying by saying that is you think disabled people should die, or should not live, or you couldn't do it, or you couldn't be as strong as I am. It's important to recognize that disabled people have weak moments, and it's okay to have those moments, but it's certainly not okay to bring up those kind of discussions during a sexual encounter with somebody. It's certainly wasn't good for me, and it was very shocking to me when he said that to me. I really was so taken aback. I was lying there all ready to go and all raring to have the best time, and that's what he said to me, and I just didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to feel, I didn't know what to say, and I didn't know how to navigate that. Another thing that you shouldn't really ever say to somebody with a disability during sex or after sex, or at any point really, is, I had somebody once where we hooked up, and we were hooking up, and things were, again, we were in really vulnerable positions doing stuff with each other, and he stopped and said to me, after we did it, he said, I noticed when we had sex, you weren't as active as I would have liked. You weren't as independent in the bedroom as I would have liked. And I was so taken aback by that and so hurt, because there's only so much I can do as a disabled person who uses a wheelchair in the bedroom. I know that, and I'm fully aware of that. And it was really hurtful to know that my disabled body and my disabled experience didn't arouse him, and I felt that I shouldn't have had to be told that. And I really, even though he thought that, why did he feel the need to tell me that? And it just was very, very uncomfortable, and actually it was quite rude, and I didn't know how to feel about that. So those are just 4 things, or some things rather, that you should never say to a disabled person during sex. I am disability awareness consultant Andrew Gurza for Toronto Pride. I'm so grateful to have been here. Thank you for your time. If you want to get a hold of me, you can follow me on social media at Andrew Gurza _ on Twitter and Instagram. And you can follow my award-winning podcast, Disability After Dark, where I talk about things like this and so much more, and where I shine a bright light on disability stories. Thank you so much, everybody. Happy Pride!